Hey, big shout out to Magic Mind for being our sponsor and for creating a really great product. Check it out, folks. This is good stuff. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. Thank you very much for joining me, parents and teachers and clinicians. If you're here too, thank you very much. Hey, listen, I have opened up my coaching practice again. If you are in need of some consulting, I always do free discovery sessions. I will make sure you have that contact information. But for now, we need to talk about cannabis and we need to talk about addiction. And we still have people doubting, shaking their heads and wondering if cannabis is actually even addictive. And certainly if you're going to ask your teenager, I'm sure there's 4 or 5 million pages on Google that will show you that it's not. But when you talk to people who've been through it, I think you're going to get a different answer. And I've got one of those people all the way from our place of origin. I've got Luke Worsfold here. Luke's got one hell of a story. I'll let him tell it to you, but let's get in. Thank you for joining us. Let's help our teens. Luke, thanks so much for being here on Beyond Risk and Back. Appreciate you, man.
No, that's awesome to be here. Thanks very much, Aaron.
It's my pleasure. You've got quite a mission going on inside addiction. Let's talk about what you got going on. And I will say, as someone who's in long-term recovery, I'm 25 years at the time of this recording. You're 6 years deep into your recovery and still kind of seem like a young buck to me. But bro, you're off and running. You've gone deep quickly. What's going on? What are you trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, so for me, my mission is to help people and make sure they don't die from addiction, right? So many people lose their life. My mum, she lost her life to drink and drugs and to addiction. So my real mission is to, through counselling and education and talking to people and, promoting all of the benefits of having a good mental health, to help people raise their level of consciousness so they don't have to die from addiction. That's the main point. And so they can break free from it like you have and like I have. That's what's so important.
One of the things that interests me about your story, and I want to get to that next, is the fact that you did it through addiction therapy. And one of the things about the 12-step rooms, if you remember from the times that you did go, it was that they say, hey, therapy didn't work for us and we had to find another way. Therapy worked for you. Addiction therapy worked for you. And so I want to hear more about that as we get into it. But let's jump back to the beginning of when all this started to happen, which it sounds like it was your childhood. Your mom died when you were relatively young.
Yeah, so for me, it starts in my teen years and with my relationship to my mum and my then mums, as I had a stepmom later on. So for me, growing up with a mum who drank and used drugs, that was difficult. I didn't really know what that meant or what that was like. I know sometimes she wasn't there for me. Sometimes it would be challenging to be around and be in that environment, not having proper meals made and struggling to always want the connection that she can give. So that was difficult for me. And then as she passed away when I was 10, that was just in my formative years, right? Just as I was coming into sort of my teen years and just going into school in the UK, into like secondary school. So that was really, really challenging going through that trauma then. And I also had 2 older brothers, and they were 4 and 5 years older than me, so quite a bit older than me. And we would always, boys will be boys. We were quite, angry and hurt and grieving and emotional because of the loss of mum and all the trauma with mum. And we display that through the main emotion that's acceptable for men in many ways through societal conditioning is anger. We'd beat each other up. Boys will be boys. They're just fighting again. There wasn't any room for me to feel any of my emotions or feel the grief or cry or process anything. It was just fighting. Boys will be boys. And that quickly led to the aggression and to bottling up all my emotions and shutting down all my emotions. And for me, Aaron, that coincided with a time in my life when weed started to come in. I started to have my first joint when I was about 11. So just after mum died was like my first joint. And then my obviously drinking alcohol. And I tried cocaine and other drugs a bit later on. But for me, smoking weed was something I did as a young teenager, sneaking around, lying to my parents, staying around friends' houses, staying out completely. But at that time in my life, I was really burying all my emotions and using drugs and acting out. And that was my foundational years through my teens.
Did your mom use drugs your whole life, or is it something that started when your brothers were young or when you were young and it just progressed rapidly?
Yeah, I think she was always a drinker. For as far as I know, she was always a drinker. So she was an alcoholic. And then she also used drugs as well, like cocaine and that kind of stuff. But she was always an alcoholic as far as I can remember, as long as I've ever known.
And you're saying you're like literally would go without meals sometimes, things like that. She wouldn't be there. Like,
yeah, I would go around her house. I'd be around her house and I would be looking in the fridge trying to find some food because she'd be passed out somewhere. And there was always these little 2.5-minute microwave pizzas. So you'd put the little pizza in the oven and you'd have to warm it up and make myself that. That was the only thing that was kind of around. And sometimes it was difficult to kind of get my needs met.
This affected obviously you and your brothers in an extreme manner, and they were quite a bit older than you. How did school go for you? How was, 11 years old, your mom's gone, you're still going to school, or did you drop out? How did school happen?
Yeah, I was still going to school. So luckily I had my dad. My dad's always been in my life. So I was still going to school and mostly living with dad and spending time with mum as much as I was allowed, as much as I could. And yeah, still going to school. School was difficult though, because I was still around a lot of people who were smoking, who were experimenting with drugs, a lot of men. Although I was in a mixed school, there's a lot of guys, and I was always the smallest one. So because I was born premature, because my mum was doing drugs when she was pregnant with me, I was born really premature. So I was always the smallest kid. I was a really late developer. And that just led to lots of bullying, being the smallest one, being a late developer, not having girls, all that kind of stuff just led to loads and loads of bullying, which was difficult because it felt like there was a sense of powerlessness that was reinforced. I don't have power in school. I don't have power at home with my brothers, kind of beating me up. So it did lead to a lot of powerlessness in my life and therefore a low self-esteem, which led to me really hooking on to drink and drugs as I was just more and more introduced into my life.
Are you still in touch with your brothers? Is this a relationship you've been able to repair, or is it still strained?
Yeah, we're still in touch. We're still in touch with my brothers and my dad. Sometimes we go and play golf together. And that's probably the most common thing we do every couple of weeks or every couple of months, sorry. We go and play golf together and we're still in touch and have close as guys really get. A guy relationship, playing golf and having some banter. But yeah, we're still in touch. There's no major hard feelings. I think they were going through their own stuff as well, right? They didn't necessarily abuse me. I wouldn't say it was that far, but we were all being guys. We didn't have to deal with this trauma and this grief, and we were just fighting and beating each other up. And I would give it as good as I got. I'll tell you that, Aaron. I would definitely pick fights on them, and I would give it as good as I got. I was a little shit. I don't know how to swear, but I was a little shit as well. So it was kind of like that echo chamber. Just no one really knew how to deal with it, and we're all kind of in that sort of washing machine, just getting thrown around and around and around.
Did they struggle with drugs, alcohol, anything like that?
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much for them, but they've definitely had their struggles. My brother, Matt, we smoked a lot of weed together. He's actually stopped smoking now. But yeah, we definitely smoked a lot together, and I have done drugs with them in the past, for sure.
Okay, so now fast forward, I'm very curious about your last day of using. Was it an abrupt stop? Did you have a rock bottom moment? Was it a slow burn of I just got to get over this and you started therapy, or how did it all come to the end?
For me, about smoking weed, I was definitely smoking weed and using drugs and drinking a lot and doing a lot of coke and stuff, but there was always that idea that I'm not kind of that bad. I'm not really an addict. There's a lot of justification. And there was a point in my life where I ran my own company after I left school. And as I ran that company and built up and got more and more successful, I'd drink more, do more drugs and smoke more weed. And that got to a point where I ended up losing the whole business because it just had so much debt and just went down in flames. And there was a point where I was sitting on a park bench and I'd run out of money. I didn't have any money left. And I was looking for my phone book, trying to find new numbers to call people, to get more drugs, to kind of keep things going. And I remember I was taking, the last few drags on my joint, and in my phone, Aaron, there was one number left. And this person in my phone, out of all the people I called and manipulated over the previous months, this one person, he was a business mentor and a good friend of mine, and he'd been through recovery himself. And I just knew that it wasn't a good idea to call him, but I had no choice. So I just pressed call and rang the phone. And Aaron, as I tried to bullshit my way through the call, he cut me right off with a sentence that changed my life forever. And he said, "Luke, you're a crackhead." And although I'd never smoked crack, in that moment, it just pierced all that denial that I was somehow better than everyone else. I was a special snowflake. I wasn't really that bad in addiction. It just pierced all of that. And I was like, shit, I'm just like my mum. I'm heading towards death just like her. I'm just going to die of drinking and drugs. Like, what's going on here? And my friend really cut through all of that denial, cut through the whole smoke screen and bullshit I was trying to convince myself of and everyone of. And in that moment, I realised I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to die of drinking and drugs. I don't know how I'm going to solve this problem. Don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I just don't want to go on like this. And it was at that moment I kind of searched around for options. And that's how I found myself into sitting in a therapist's office and having my first session and just kind of verbal diarrheaing all of my stuff out and all of my story out. And that was over, 6-7 years ago now, and I've been in therapy since, working through everything. But that was the moment I decided to stop, and the actual last kind of use of a drug would come, almost a year later. But that was definitely the moment where I really pierced that denial and decided this has to change.
What was the first thing that changed when you started to really see the light? And I know, the recovery process took time. You and I were talking off the air. There were some slips, and I want to talk about those. But what was the first thing that changed for you, for good or bad?
I think the denial, just that I saw just the mess, the chaos. I just looked at my life through a different lens rather than with the rose-tinted glasses on. I just saw, shit, I really fucked this up. I lost my company. I had people phoning me up, asking me where money was, chasing me. I had to move from a penthouse flat into a house share. I lost the Mercedes. I lost all of these things in my life. And I was literally sitting on a park bench, and I was like, just saw that. I really saw it and felt it at a visceral level that my life had fallen to this point, and really woke up to those emotions and to the shame and guilt, which really lit a fire under my arse, because I realised, like I said, I was heading towards death just like mum. So the first thing that changed really was that denial, and that motivated me to take some kind of action and to go to therapy.
Hey, folks, I want to share with you a product I've been trying out lately. It's called Magic Mind. It's a natural nootropic drink that helps with focus. I've been trying it alongside my morning coffee. It has cut down on my caffeine consumption, and I really do stay more focused and get a lot more done during the day. So if you're looking for a new drink to try out, I would recommend it. It's extremely healthy. It's filled with all the kinds of stuff you want, you and your kids. It's also available at Sprouts. Check it out. Get it on Amazon. It's an amazing product. And big thanks to Magic Mind for being our first sponsor. You talked a lot about the boys will be boys thing, and we weren't really brought up to feel, and so we box up the feelings, we bottle it up, and it comes out in anger and stuff like that. Why therapy? Why did you start with therapy? Because therapy is there's a caricature of therapy that seems to be the opposite of everything that you were in that moment. So why did you start with therapy? How did this start in a therapist's office, not at a meeting with a bunch of other heavies and their drugs and stories? It was you and a therapist.
I think part of it was that addict black and white thinking. I'm either going to be emotionless or I'm going to be all the way 1,000% emotions, right? Just that black and white from not to 0 to 100. That was definitely in there somewhere. But also I listened to a lot of mentors on YouTube and a lot of amazing people. And one of them was a guy named Phil McKernan. And he spoke a lot about being authentic and the power of therapy in order to become authentic and find your authentic self. And that was the main motivation. I was like, damn, this version of Luke sitting on this park bench, he's not authentic. He's lying. Like, this isn't the best I can be. This isn't, the highest version of myself. There's no authenticity. I'm lying. I'm full of shame and guilt. Like, I'm just in a bad place. So for me, it was to become authentic and to go to therapy. And that's what this guy said on this YouTube video. If you go to therapy, you can kind of become authentic. Of course, he had a lot more than that. But that was a general gist, was if you go to therapy, you can learn to become authentic. So I decided to go and work through my emotions. I didn't know what therapy was. And to be honest, opening up that kind of box, or the big bag of shit I've been carrying around where I've just been chucking everything in there, scared the shit out of me. And I remember walking into my first therapy session, I really thought I was going to spontaneously combust or explode or throw up or something. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was like, holy shit. But I just went, and I was just like, I just had this commitment that whatever is in front of me, I'm going to walk towards the path of light and not the path of darkness that Mum went down. I'm just going to walk towards the path of light, whatever happens, whatever goes on, no matter what barriers I face, I'm just going to keep going and keep pushing.
Let's break away from the story for a second, because I want to just come straight out and ask you, do you think cannabis is addictive?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, yeah, definitely.
Do you think it should be legalized?
I think that's a difficult one. I think there's loads of medicinal purposes. I don't think, should alcohol be legalized? If we could put alcohol and make it illegal, would it be illegal if it's invented now? There's definitely pros and cons to things being legalized. And I do think with marijuana, in not being legalized creates a lot of problems in terms of regulations and people getting it illegally. And then if your drug dealer sells weed, then they sell cocaine and MDMA or ecstasy and other stuff. So it can definitely lead to more things. Whereas if it was regulated, that would definitely have some benefits in terms of making it more medicinal and kind of prescribed. But I definitely think, it is 100% addictive and a lot bigger of a problem than most people think.
What's the current legal status where you are about cannabis?
So in the UK, as far as I'm aware, it can be medically prescribed on some instances, but it is for the most part illegal to kind of grow it and have it as possession. But it is, as far as I know, in the UK illegal, and that's not going to change as far as I know anytime soon.
You having it as a kid, how did you normally get it? Did you get it through your brothers? Were you working direct with dealers? How were you affording it?
As a kid, yeah, I've never told this story, but I will do. But one of my friend's dads, he used to smoke weed, right? And he used to have a tray on the top of the kitchen counter, like up high where the kids can't reach, right? Up high, and he used to have his weed in there. And as kids, we would wait till all of his family went to bed and we'd all stay around his house because we knew his dad had the weed. So we'd all stay at his house and we would go there and pick a bit of the weed off, like a little nugget of weed, and we'd try and take a small nugget so he wouldn't notice. And that's how we got the weed in the very beginning. And then as I got a bit older, I did actually start to get it off one of my brothers. And I didn't know how to roll a joint, and he would roll joints for me. And then as I got older, I started to learn to kind of get it myself and meet people and that kind of stuff.
What about parents who aren't sure or don't think that weed is detrimental or bad? What about parents who think it's okay that kids smoke weed? They're just more concerned about the cocaine, the heavier stuff. What would you say to a parent who's looking down that road?
Obviously, it's definitely a step in the right direction, right? If someone's doing cocaine every day and they're smoking joints, when I work with a client and with their parent, and I'll talk to the parents, or if I'm working with a teen, I'll say, look, it's best to work on the cocaine first and to get down the cocaine and stop doing that and stop the drinking so much. But the weed is definitely a problem. I'll always focus on that as well. And for me, I stopped smoking weed as well. But I think the challenges with weed is that it seems like, oh, it's nothing compared to this stuff is nothing. And it can be very shrugged off. But it's almost in the fact that it's kind of nothing makes it so powerful, makes it so challenging, because it really is a haze over your life. It kills your motivation, it makes you paranoid. There's so many challenging side effects to it. And because it's so nonchalant a lot of the time and just kind of put to the bottom of the list, it just makes it really, really difficult. And a lot of clients smoke a lot of weed every single day, and it's really, really challenging for your life. I know for me, it definitely had a really big impact. So to parents, I'd say 100% don't take it lightly. Don't take it lightly. And it's definitely a drug that needs to go. In my own personal experience, I'm completely sober. I don't do any drugs or drink. And that's the important thing. I even quit smoking because I didn't want that in my life. So I think definitely stopping smoking and to focus on that and to get, children off smoking weed is really, really important.
Now you're a counselor. And I want to understand what that means in the UK. In the United States, a counselor is a therapist. You'd go see your counselor, you're a therapist. But I don't know about the different classifications in the UK. Is a counselor and a therapist the same thing? Because you are an addiction counselor.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. You kind of have like a psychiatrist that's at the top. Then you have like a counselor or therapist. Then you may have like a recovery coach or a recovery worker. Then maybe you've got like a sponsor from AA that's kind of down below that.
Okay. And so at what point in your recovery did you go back to school to do this? And what was the inspiration? Just happiness? Just suddenly you had all this money because you weren't buying weed? Like what was that part of the process?
Yeah, so for me, I was in therapy, working on my addiction and processing my emotions and learning to feel my emotions. And to be honest, Aaron, my therapist had such a big impact on me. I really wanted to help more people. I was at a point in my life where I didn't want to run my web design and marketing company anymore. It was very unfulfilling, and I just felt like if I just build a website so a company can sell more cupcakes, they're just going to sell more fucking cupcakes. It doesn't change the world. It doesn't change the planet. I don't care if they sell more cupcakes. Like, it just was so unfulfilling. And it just coincided with my own addiction journey, my therapist helping me and wanting to find more fulfillment in my life. I just decided I'm going to go and become a counsellor. And I went back to university and got a degree. And that was a really, really big challenge for me. And I got the degree and then started the company I run now, helping clients every single day get their drink and drug use under control. So the main motivation was just all of those different things colliding in my life. And it came back in a way to that first mentor who showed me about therapy and authenticity. I felt like I was following my intuition. I was following my intuitive path, and it naturally just kind of led on. I was in sort of a flow state working in therapy, and then the opportunity for a degree came up, and I spoke to the lady in the university, and she was like, you're going to learn about addiction and motivation and personal development and psychology and why we do all this stuff. And I was like, that sounds fun. I'm learning that anyway. I would love to do a degree. Let's go. And I was just super motivated to go and do it and just do those studies. And it was one of the best decisions of my life.
So now let's speak specifically about addiction therapy. First of all, if a parent is looking at their child and scared by the concept of addiction, by the concept of therapy, by the concept of recovery, and the cost of a treatment program, why addiction therapy? What is it about addiction therapy that you like, that you would recommend, and how would a parent get started into something like that?
So I think some of the things to look for in an addiction, like, is to have an addiction specialist therapist. So a lot of the clients I've worked with, maybe they've had normal therapy just with a traditional therapist, but they've kind of spoken about a lot of things in their life. Maybe that was to process a grief or process a great breakup or process something that happened in their life or to work through some anxiety or depression. They just went to general counselling for something general. Where addiction specialist therapy comes into it is working with someone, in my opinion, who has a personal experience of addiction, so they understand what's happening. They're not just reading from a textbook. They understand what's going on. They can call you on your bullshit. They can call you on what's going on. You won't get things past them. You can't manipulate them into what's going on. It's also important to recognise that they have the professional qualifications and knowledge of addiction, and they have the personal experience as well. That's the kind of key thing to think about, is both of those sides. And especially when I work with teen kids or teenagers, because of my age, that really helps. I can kind of, from a parent's point of view, I have the degree, I have the qualifications, I've read all the website, I've read all the reviews, I've read all of those things. But from the teens' point of view, I'm a little bit older than them, right? I'm 29, so I'm quite young, and I relate well to them. I'm kind of like an older brother. I'm not like some old woman just telling them what to do and telling them that they should stop smoking weed, and they're just going to be like, I don't care, like, who are you to tell me that? I'm younger and more relatable to them. So I work well with teens, especially teen men, when I work with them and talk to them in that kind of older brother way, sometimes about my story, and can lead them, but also having the understanding of like that therapeutic approach as well. So I'm not just having a chat, I'm actually giving them therapy and providing them therapy as we go. So there's some of the key things to look for in an addiction therapist, and really the value of having someone who specializes in that and has that experience.
Does addiction therapy look at addiction as a disease, as they talk about in AA and NA and stuff like that? Is addiction a disease?
I think it depends on what kind of addiction therapist you go to and what their own professional or personal opinion is. If they're more 12 steps orientated, they may see it as a disease, and that may be their model of recovery. I think every kind of counsellor kind of has their own unique perspective. My own personal perspective is I don't think it's necessarily a disease or something you have for your kind of entire life. I think it is a behaviour that you repeat over and over again, and it can be from nature or nurture, but it's definitely something to work on. And I think you can have an addictive personality. Like for me, the way that I'm wired definitely lean towards compulsive behaviour or black and white thinking or doing things to the extreme. I definitely have an addictive personality. I can be very obsessive with things, very focused on things, overly focused to the point where I need to manage balance. And so I definitely agree with addictive personality, and also managing cross addiction, right? That also comes with being addicted to one thing and then another thing and then another thing and another thing, and stop smoking the weed or stop doing the cocaine, then you just smoke the weed, and then you stop the weed and then you just drink alcohol, whatever it may be. So yeah, I guess that's my perspective on it.
How are parents going to follow up with you? Where would you like them to go and learn more about you and what you've built and your vision?
Yeah, so I think the best place to go is just to the website insideaddiction.co.uk, and we do have a page on there for family members, and they can inquire and have a think about things, and they can have some support for themselves and also for their teen or their loved one if they want to get them some support as well. But I think it's really important when you're in that situation as a mum of a teen is to find someone who can help. It's sometimes hard to be a prophet in your own land, as they say, right? To actually help your own kids is sometimes challenging. You may need someone outside to help out, guide, your son or daughter in the right direction and help them get the support that they need.
To learn more about Luke Worsfold, head over to insideaddiction.co.uk. It's got a great about page. The story he told here on the show is also there. Just a fascinating story. And I really think the lesson behind this for me was understanding the difference, as always. And it was the beginning of my wife and I running our treatment program, and being an addiction coach versus what Luke is an addiction counselor. There is a difference between motivation and therapy. That's an important distinction. The therapeutic process and the motivation process are both necessary in recovery, and they're very different, and both are effective. And they all have their own very special place within the recovery program. As always, I'd like to thank Deepen Productions for making this program sound so good. I would like to thank my listeners. Thank you for being here. Be sure to listen, like, subscribe, and share Beyond Risk and Back with any parents who might be struggling with their kiddo. Remember, parents, take care of yourselves first, your adult relationships second, and your children third, because that's how we do our best work with our kids. I'll see you next week on Beyond Risk and Back. Big thanks to Magic Mind for sponsoring this episode of Beyond Risk and Back. I really like the stuff. You got to check it out.